She accidentally farted in the elevator with the CEO, but his next words were unforgettable. It started with the most humiliating sound you can imagine, in a silent elevator with the CEO himself. And just when Sophie thought her career was over, he said something she would never forget. Before we continue, if you enjoy touching and inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Now, let's get back to the story. Oh no. That wasn't in her head, that was real. Loud enough to echo off the brushed steel elevator walls. Sophie's heart froze, her hand tightening around the strap of her caramel handbag like it could somehow pull her through the floor and into another dimension. Her eyes darted toward the ceiling, then back down, then sideways, straight into the steel blue gaze of Ethan Cole. He didn't say a word. Yet. The silence in that glass and metal box was suddenly not just awkward, it was eternal. Her blush climbed from her neck to her ears in one heartbeat. She'd been holding it in. Too much morning coffee, too much stress, too little breakfast. And now? At the exact moment the elevator doors glided shut, sealing her in with him, her body had betrayed her in the most mortifying way possible. Ethan Cole, CEO, billionaire, untouchable. And now, an involuntary witness to her digestive disgrace. He stood perfectly still, shoulders relaxed, one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly against the railing. His suit looked like it had been tailored in heaven and pressed by angels. That calm, unreadable expression on his face was the same one he wore in Forbes magazine, except now there was something else flickering beneath his stillness. A smirk. Sophie let out a breath, a squeaky, half-strangled thing, and tried to speak, to fix it, to do something, but her voice caught on panic. I swear that wasn't, well, I mean it was, but oh my God, I need to, can we restart the day? Her voice cracked at the end, brittle with embarrassment. She squeezed her eyes shut. Please, someone, anyone, push the emergency button, flood the building, end the world. Just don't let this be real. Then he said it. Calm, warm, unbelievably kind. Best icebreaker I've had all week. She blinked. What? Did he just... Sophie opened one eye. Ethan Cole was smiling, genuinely smiling. And not the PR perfect kind, either. It was crooked, charming, just shy of a laugh. Her mouth parted, dumbfounded. You're not horrified? He tilted his head, his voice low and smooth like he was telling her a secret. Honestly? I'm relieved. I thought it was going to be me. And with that, he laughed. A real, rich laugh that bounced off the elevator walls and curled around her like a warm scarf. Sophie stared at him, half ready to melt into the floor, half amazed this was actually happening. I'm Ethan, he added, like she didn't already know. Then, glancing at her crooked name badge, he nodded toward it. Sophie Hart, executive assistant. First week? She gave a little nod, words still forming in slow motion. Day 2. Impressive start. She bit her lip, smiled in spite of herself, and felt the weight of humiliation slowly lifting. Not gone, but lighter, like maybe she'd survive this. Ding! The elevator stopped at the 20th floor. She wasn't supposed to get off yet, but her body moved before her brain could protest. I think this is me, she blurted, stepping out, as the doors started to close. It's not, he said through the narrowing gap, that same amused glint in his eyes. Then, click! The doors shut. She stood frozen in the hallway. 3 floors too early, facing a wall of frosted glass that didn't recognize her security badge. Her stomach growled loudly. She hadn't even had breakfast. Again? From her handbag she pulled out the one thing that had always brought her comfort. Her grandmother's handkerchief. Cream-colored with tiny lavender flowers embroidered into the corner, its edges gently frayed from years of use. Sophie clutched it tightly, pressed it to her lips, and tried not to laugh or cry. It was going to be a long day. Later that morning, She sat at her shared desk, a tiny modular corner beside the copy machine, trying to disappear behind a stack of HR onboarding forms. The building buzzed with low chatter and the occasional ding of elevators. She avoided every reflective surface and flinched at the sound of approaching footsteps. Then, tap, tap. She looked up. Nina, from legal mid-40s and known for her spreadsheet rage, was staring at her with raised brows and a half-smirk. "Sophie, right?" "Yes." "You're the one who rode the elevator with him this morning?" Sophie's blood went cold. Why?" Nina leaned in like a gossiping aunt at Thanksgiving. "Because the whole team heard him laughing, in the elevator, with someone. That never happens." Sophie's eyes widened. "I didn't think anyone heard—" "Oh, honey," Nina said with a chuckle, "the man barely even smiles in the boardroom. Whatever you did, people are talking." Sophie's heartbeat tripped over itself, but Nina's tone softened. "Don't worry, he seemed lighter after. Good lighter. Maybe you saved the company without knowing it." Sophie gave a weak smile, still clutching her grandmother's handkerchief in her lap under the desk. The lavender corner peeked out like a tiny banner of dignity. She didn't feel like a lifesaver. She felt like a walking embarrassment. Still, by noon, 2 interns had stopped by to refill the copier and casually glance at her like she was suddenly interesting. And at lunch, when she finally sat in the break room with a sad little salad from home, someone placed a mug beside her. Black coffee, no cream, no sugar. Exactly how she liked it. He must have remembered from her onboarding form. She looked up. A tall man in a sleek gray suit was walking away without a word. Her heart stopped. No, it couldn't be. But on the rim of the cup was a small lavender sticker, just a speck. She stared at it, stunned. Then her phone buzzed. A new internal email from Ethan Cole to Sophie Hart. Subject, elevator diplomacy, body. "Next time, let's both take the stairs." Or, "Coffee, my treat." She nearly dropped her fork. The office buzzed on around her, oblivious, but inside her tiny cubicle of existence, something had shifted. Not just her reputation, but her place in this building, in this city, maybe even in her own life. And yet, before she could even respond to the email, she noticed something chilling. Another email, this one from an anonymous sender. No name, no subject, just a forwarded attachment, a cropped image of her and Ethan in the elevator, frozen mid-laugh. And the caption, Sophie Hart, already flirting her way to the top. Her stomach turned. Who would send that, and why? Outside, the office still hummed with soft music and mechanical keys. But inside Sophie's chest, thunder. She closed the email, her hands trembled. This wasn't just awkward anymore, it was personal. She must think she's clever. He never even laughs. Now, suddenly, it's always the quiet ones. The voices were quiet but sharp. Knives, wrapped in paper towels. Sophie stood just inside the break room, gripping her plastic fork too tightly. The moment she entered, the conversation shifted, just enough to sting. A group of women from the marketing floor, all polished heels and professional smirks, were huddled near the coffee machine. One of them, tall, icy, with sharp red lips, glanced in Sophie's direction. Not kindly. Sophie didn't say a word. She crossed to the fridge, her steps careful, deliberate. Inside, her homemade pasta was still untouched, sitting in the same reused glass container her mom had given her before she moved. Comfort food. Something simple. She carried it back to the table, sat down, and stared at it. Her appetite had vanished. She thought about the email, the photo, that cruel caption. Sophie Hart, already flirting her way to the top? She hadn't answered Ethan's email yet. What could she even say? Thanks for not laughing at my digestive failure. And also, someone thinks I'm sleeping with you. No. This wasn't about a joke anymore. It was about being seen, misread, judged. And in this place where your name could climb or crash in a single lunch break, Sophie felt like she was walking on glass in bare feet. Across the hall, the glass walls of the executive suite shimmered in the midday light. Ethan was in there, probably behind his desk, or pacing like he always did when he was deep in thought. She didn't want to seem like she was looking, but her eyes drifted that way anyway. The red-lipped woman noticed. She whispered something behind her cup, and they all laughed. Sophie's chest tightened. She lowered her gaze to her lap, where her hand rested on the old handkerchief. She hadn't even realized she was holding it again. The delicate lavender stitching was beginning to fray at the edges, but it still smelled faintly like chamomile. It was her anchor. The door opened. Footsteps. Then, surprise. A plate appeared in front of her, grilled cheese, cut diagonally, just like her grandmother used to make it. Sophie looked up. "Maddie?" She blinked. Maddie Castillo, the company receptionist, only 22 and full of energy, slid into the seat beside her. Bright scarf, oversized earrings, and that messy bun that never moved. "I saw your face. You needed carbs." Sophie blinked, warmth rushing to her throat. "You didn't have to—" "I wanted to," Maddie interrupted, reaching for the ketchup packets like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Also, rumor mill's on fire, just letting you know before it burns your hair off." Sophie gave a dry laugh. Weak but real. "Too late." Maddie leaned closer, eyes serious now. "You okay?" Sophie hesitated. "No, but I will be." They sat together in companionable silence, eating grilled cheese with ketchup. Sophie's stomach settled for the first time all day. It wasn't much, but it felt like a lifeline. Later that afternoon, as Sophie sorted invoices in the quiet of the 18th floor finance corner, her inbox pinged again. Another message from unknown subject. "They're watching you, body. You might want to keep your innocent act away from the elevators." There was no image this time, just that sentence. Sophie's pulse spiked. She looked around, suddenly conscious of her posture, her blouse, the way her ankles were crossed. Was someone really watching her? Or was this just the building's cruel welcome ritual? Either way, it felt like a game had started, and she didn't know the rules. But then, another ping. From Ethan Cole. Subject, re-elevator diplomacy body. I noticed you didn't reply. If someone made you uncomfortable, I need to know. And if you're just avoiding elevators forever now, I can arrange for teleportation or a staircase snack break. Sophie read it twice. Then again. There it was, concern, light humor, a direct line to the man at the top. But part of her hesitated. Would answering only fuel the rumors? Was this how it always started? The slow burn of whispers and side eyes, just because a powerful man noticed someone who wasn't already part of the club, and still. She reached for her keyboard. Teleportation sounds nice, but grilled cheese with company might be better. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. A micro-victory. Just one. That evening, Sophie stepped out into the cool air outside the building, the city humming around her like a distant lullaby. She adjusted her scarf, pulling it close around her neck, and headed toward the subway. Then she saw it, a figure leaning against the stone pillar near the revolving door. Dark gray coat, hands in pockets, watching the street with a quiet patience. Ethan. Sophie's feet stopped. She hadn't seen him leave his office. He turned slowly and smiled. Grilled cheese, you weren't kidding. Her heart did that strange skip again. I was raised on it. He nodded toward the little cafe across the street. Join me? Or would that give the rumor mill more fuel? She hesitated. I don't care what they say, he added softly now, but I care if it hurts you. The world around them blurred. Just for a second. Sophie clutched the handkerchief in her pocket, lavender flowers between her fingers. I'll come, she said, but only if we sit outside, and you let me pick the soup. His laugh was low and surprised. I don't think anyone's ever made conditions on me for soup. Sophie grinned. "Welcome to my world." They crossed the street together, light footsteps, two silhouettes side by side under a golden street lamp, but neither of them saw the phone camera peeking out from the backseat window of a Blacktown car parked nearby. The flash was off, but the lens was sharp. "You really picked lentil soup?" Ethan looked down at the steaming bowl between them like it had personally offended him. Sophie shrugged, sipping from her mug with mock seriousness. "It builds character." He gave her a skeptical look. "That's one way to describe it. Another is beige disappointment in a bowl." That made her laugh. A full, unguarded laugh that caught her by surprise. She covered her mouth, cheeks flushed, and tried not to choke on her soup. Ethan leaned back in his chair, pleased. "See? Already better than our first elevator ride." Sophie smiled despite herself. They sat at a small bistro table just outside the cafe, under a golden patio light. It flickered slightly in the breeze, casting warm shadows across the tablecloth. The city buzzed around them, pedestrians, honking taxis, the occasional food cart bell. But in their little corner, it felt like a pocket of calm. Across from her, Ethan looked different than he had in the elevator. Still immaculately dressed, of course, but there was a softness now. His tie was gone. The top two buttons of his shirt undone, one sleeve rolled up just enough to show a silver watch glinting on his wrist. He stirred his soup once, then set the spoon down. "You're not eating," she noted. "I'm trying," he said, "but this is dense." Sophie bit her lip to keep from laughing again. "It's healthy," she offered. "Fiber." Tragic. Her eyes sparkled. "So, Mr. CEO, what would you have picked?" He gestured toward her half-eaten grilled cheese. "That, obviously, with tomato soup, which, by the way, is the only acceptable soup and sandwich pairing." Sophie nodded with faux seriousness. "I'll file that under corporate policy." He grinned. Their eyes met, just a flicker too long. She looked down at her napkin, suddenly shy. Her fingers brushed something soft in her coat pocket. The handkerchief. She held it for a moment, grounding herself in its gentle texture. Her grandmother used to say it was stitched for moments that matter. Maybe this was one. Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly a bit more serious. "So, are you okay?" Sophie blinked. He gave her a knowing look. "The email, the photo." Her stomach tightened. "You saw it?" He nodded slowly. "One of my department heads forwarded it. I asked him not to." Her pulse raced. "Look, Sophie." He leaned forward, arms resting on the table. "If someone's trying to make you look like you're working your way up through me, I need you to know I'd never let that narrative stick. You've done nothing wrong. You were charming, brave even. And whoever's behind this..." He paused. "They're going to wish they hadn't tried." Sophie looked at him carefully. "You're not mad that people are talking?" His voice dropped a note. "Let them talk. They don't know me. And clearly, they don't know you." She searched his face. Ethan Cole, calm, composed, brilliant, the man whose photo had graced more business magazines than she could count. Now sitting across from her, defending her name over lentil soup and grilled cheese like it was the most natural thing in the world. She swallowed a lump in her throat. "Thank you, really." He held her gaze a moment longer. "You deserve more than thanks." But before the warmth could settle, a new chill crept in. Across the street, just inside the glass windows of a glossy restaurant, a figure was watching. Vanessa Green, chief PR officer, late 30s. Stunning, powerful, calculated, and known for one very specific thing, never letting Ethan get close to anyone without her stamp of approval. She tapped her phone with perfectly manicured fingers. The screen lit up, an open chat thread. "Vanessa, she's a liability. He'll thank me later. Make sure it gets posted by 9 a.m. No reply came back, but she knew it was being handled. She closed the message, took one last look at the patio across the street, and turned away with a cold, satisfied smile. Back at the table, Sophie was finishing her last bite of crust when Ethan spoke again, this time softer. "You know, I've seen 100 polished people walk through those elevators, confident, impressive, safe, but you were real." Sophie blinked, unsure how to respond. Then a gust of wind, just enough to knock over her water glass and send the napkins flying. One of them caught in her coat pocket. "Ah!" she gasped, standing quickly. "Sorry, oh no!" But Ethan was already moving, catching the napkin mid-air like it was a business pitch. "You okay?" he asked. She laughed, flustered. "I really need to stop being a walking disaster around you." He smiled again. "Don't." She blinked. "Don't what?" His eyes were warm. "Don't change." She stared at him for a moment, feeling something unfurl in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. And then her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A new social media notification. Sophie Hart tagged in a post. Her stomach dropped. She opened it. There it was. A blurry photo of her and Ethan on the patio, leaning close across the table. Captioned, "From elevator gas to grilled cheese dates. Fast track, anyone?" Hundreds of views. Already climbing. Sophie's heart pounded. Someone had followed them. Someone was watching. And this time, it was public. Sophie didn't sleep. The post had exploded overnight. What started as a whisper in the elevator was now trending inside the company Slack. People weren't subtle, not even trying to be. Screenshots, emojis, LOL reactions. One person had even photoshopped her face onto a grilled cheese sandwich. It wasn't just embarrassing. It was malicious. By 8:45 a.m., Sophie was in the building, walking fast, her caramel bag clutched to her chest and her eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't dare check her phone again. The notifications hadn't stopped since 2 a.m. One message from Maddie said, "Don't read the comments." Please don't. So she didn't. But her imagination did the rest. The moment she entered her floor, the air shifted. Conversations paused. People pretended to look busy, and Sophie felt it. The weight of being that girl, not the smart one, not the new hire with potential, just the gossip. "Ms. Hart?" The voice made her jump. It was the HR coordinator, standing stiffly in the hallway, holding a printed memo like a weapon. "Mr. Cole would like to see you now." Sophie's heart sank. She followed without a word. The elevator carried her to the executive suite on the 22nd floor, a place she'd only ever heard about in passing. It was her first time up here. She'd always imagined it would smell like leather and ambition, but it just smelled like expensive air filters and stress. Vanessa Green was already waiting just outside Ethan's glass-walled office. Impeccably dressed in a steel blue pantsuit, she gave Sophie a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Please wait here. He's wrapping up a call." Sophie nodded, trying not to fidget. Inside, Ethan stood with his back to the door, one hand on the edge of his desk, the other pressed to his temple as he spoke low and fast into his phone. She couldn't hear the words, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. He looked furious. When he finally turned, he saw her. His expression softened instantly. He gestured for Vanessa to give them space. Vanessa didn't move. "I'd prefer to stay," she said crisply. "This is now a reputation management issue." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And I prefer you don't make it worse." Ouch. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she stepped back. The door clicked shut behind her. Sophie stood frozen in front of Ethan's desk, fingers twitching at her sides. He didn't sit. He just looked at her, steady, calm. "I'm sorry," Sophie blurted. "I never meant to cause any problems." "You didn't?" he said firmly. "Someone else did." She blinked. "But the photos, the post, I've already requested a takedown from our legal team. It should be gone within the hour." She swallowed hard. "But the damage is done." "People think that we had dinner," he interrupted gently. "Which we did." Her eyes widened. He took a step closer. But that doesn't mean they have the right to shame you, or mock you, or question your value here." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to be a story," she said, voice cracking. "I just wanted to do good work. Be invisible." "You'll never be invisible," he said, his voice low. "Not to me," her breath caught. But before the moment could deepen, a loud, ridiculous ringtone shattered the silence. "Is that Dancing Queen?" Ethan asked, startled. Sophie groaned, diving into her bag. "Oh my God, it's my mom. Please pretend this isn't happening." He chuckled as she fumbled to silence the call. "ABBA, bold choice. I was cleaning yesterday. I forgot to switch it back." They both laughed, genuinely. And for a moment, the tension cracked, just a little. Later that morning, Sophie sat alone in the quiet lounge on the 19th floor, sipping burnt coffee from a paper cup. Her hand rested over her coat pocket where the lavender handkerchief remained folded and warm. The hallway was still until, hey! It was Maddie, breathless, holding something in her hand, a printed copy of a Slack message. She slid it across the table. Sophie blinked. It was from someone anonymous, a comment thread, but someone had replied publicly. It read, "Enough, Sophie Hart is a professional. If you're intimidated by a woman being respected, that's your problem, not hers. E. Cole." Sophie stared at the page. He'd defended her. Publicly, as the CEO. No games, no vague statements, just truth. The handkerchief in her pocket felt warmer somehow. "I think," Maddie whispered, "you've got someone in your corner." But across the building, trouble was brewing. In the sleek boardroom on the 21st floor, Vanessa Green stood at the head of the table, eyes narrowed. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said to the gathered senior team, "we need to talk about the Sophie Hart situation." A few murmurs. One person raised a hand. "But didn't Ethan shut this down?" Vanessa smiled coolly. "He handled it emotionally. I plan to handle it strategically." She clicked the remote. A photo of Sophie appeared on the screen, then another, with Ethan, laughing, smiling. Then one last image. Sophie in the elevator, biting her lip, cheeks flushed, taken from the building's security feed, shown with internal compliance authorization. "This is how it starts," Vanessa said, "with sympathy, then favoritism, then chaos." The boardroom fell silent. And in the corner, someone else watched, conflicted. Clara Lynn, head of investor relations, quiet, fair, sharp. She lowered her eyes, but she'd already texted Ethan, "She's coming for her." "Ethan, be ready." Sophie stood by the window of the 18th floor lounge, sipping herbal tea like it might save her life. Her mug trembled faintly, the heat from the porcelain grounding her more than the tea itself. Outside, the city shimmered in pale November light. But inside her chest? Storms. She hadn't asked for this. Not the attention, not the whispers, certainly not the blurry photos with captions like "Office Romance Hart and Cole" splashed across every group chat she'd never been invited to. What hurt most wasn't even the rumor. It was how easily people believed it, like a woman couldn't be noticed without being accused. Like her work, her late nights, her spreadsheets meant nothing compared to a smile from the CEO. Sophie closed her eyes. She hadn't replied to Ethan's last message. Not yet. Because part of her was terrified. Not of him, but of what it could become. That afternoon, she did something bold. She packed 2 sandwiches in wax paper. Grilled cheese, again. The good kind this time, with tomato and fresh basil. Her grandmother's recipe. She wrapped them neatly and tucked one into a brown paper bag with a handwritten note. "Lentil soup deserves a second chance. But just in case, here's a backup. S.H." At 12:04, she knocked on the glass door of Ethan's office. He looked up, surprised. "I'm not interrupting, am I?" He stood quickly. "Not at all. Come in." She stepped inside. No makeup, simple ponytail. Just her usual clothes and a bag of grilled cheese sandwiches, like a lunchroom rebel carrying peace offerings instead of protest signs. I figured you might need something edible today, Ethan blinked. Then broke into a smile, what, the real kind. You made these? Guilty. You bribing me? Maybe. He laughed and took the bag. They sat at the small round table in his office. Sophie unwrapped her sandwich like it was an artifact. The smell of real butter and toasted bread filled the space. Ethan took a bite and closed his eyes. You may have just saved my afternoon. Sophie smiled but looked down, then quietly, I need to say something before this story gets ahead of me. He set the sandwich down, listening. I'm not comfortable being seen as... She hesitated. A distraction, or a rumor, or a someone in your narrative. His brow furrowed. You're not. I know you didn't mean it that way, she said softly, but they do. He was quiet. Then, so, what do you need from me? Her eyes met his, steady now, clear. Let me do my job. Let me be who I was before the elevator, before the sandwich, before the posts. I don't need special meetings or secret dinners. I need space to be good at what I do. He looked at her a long time, then reached slowly into his jacket pocket. I kept this, he said, pulling out a folded piece of cloth. Sophie's breath caught. Her grandmother's handkerchief. She blinked, confused. How? It fell out of your coat last night, he said. I was going to return it today. He handed it to her, careful, respectful. Sophie took it back gently, her fingers brushing his, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, pain, something more. Just then the door cracked open. Mr. Cole, you're 1 o'clock. Oh. A little girl peeked around the leg of her mother. A nervous junior designer, Ethan, had apparently agreed to meet about a school fundraiser. The girl stared wide-eyed at Sophie, then whispered loudly, Are you the one who tooted in the elevator? Sophie choked on her tea. Ethan burst out laughing. The mother looked like she wanted to evaporate. I am so sorry. But Sophie was already laughing too, tears in her eyes. I guess I am famous now. The little girl smiled proudly. My brother says girls don't fart, but I said that's not true. Sophie nodded solemnly. You were right. Girls absolutely fart. Ethan handed the girl a juice box from his desk fridge, like he did this every day. And just like that, the tension broke. Laughter echoed in the office like a song no one expected to need. Later that day, the company intranet lit up again, but this time with something official. A short message from the CEO's desk titled, Kindness, Curiosity, and Company Culture. It read in part, We rise not by mocking others, but by lifting those beside us. Gossip does not grow talent. Kindness does. Ethan Cole. CEO Sophie saw it just as she returned from the copier. People were reading it. Some looked sheepish. Some avoided her eyes. But one thing was clear. He'd spoken. Publicly. For her. Not as a man, but as a leader. A micro-victory. Wrapped in dignity. But downstairs. Vanessa Green stood in front of a mirror in the executive powder room, applying lipstick like war paint. She had just read the CEO's message, and she was not amused. Pulling out her phone, she opened a secure group chat and typed, If he won't protect his image, I will. She clicked send, then attached a file. Sophie Hart, HR Archive Review. The next morning, Please have a seat, Ms. Hart. The HR conference room was a muted shade of beige, as if the walls had given up. A single plant wilted in the corner like it wanted out. Sophie sat across from Janice, the HR lead, a woman who smiled with her teeth but never her eyes. Vanessa Green stood by the window, poised, silent. The moment the door clicked shut, Sophie knew this wasn't a conversation. It was an ambush. Janice folded her hands. We've received concerns about blurred boundaries between personal and professional interactions. Sophie swallowed. If this is about the elevator or the cafe, Vanessa cut in. smooth as silk. It's about optics, Sophie, not truth. You may very well have done nothing inappropriate, but when a junior employee is photographed sharing a private meal with the CEO, questions arise. Questions I didn't ask for, Sophie replied. Her voice was steady, but her palms were sweating. Vanessa's smile didn't move. Intentions don't always matter. Perception does. Janice interjected. This isn't disciplinary. It's just a review. Sophie's gaze didn't flinch. Then you won't mind if I take notes. She pulled a notepad from her bag. No shaking hands, no apology in her voice, just quiet defiance. The meeting lasted 47 minutes. They asked about after-hours messages, tone, frequency, even body language in shared spaces. Sophie answered everything, clearly, calmly. And when asked if she'd like to file a complaint against Mr. Cole, she blinked. No, he's the only one who's treated me with respect. Vanessa's jaw tightened. When Sophie stood to leave, she reached for her bag, but paused. Then, with deliberate care, Sophie took the handkerchief from her pocket and placed it on the table, lavender flowers facing up. A quiet reminder of who she was. When the review ended, she picked it back up calmly. The file can keep my words, she said softly. This stays with me. Then she left. 2 hours later. The rooftop terrace was empty, except for Ethan. He stood at the far railing, sleeves rolled, wind teasing his hair. When Sophie stepped out, he turned quickly, relief in his eyes. I heard. Of course he had. Vanessa made it formal, she said. You knew she would. He nodded. I'm sorry. Sophie leaned against the opposite railing. Don't be. It helped me see clearly. He waited. I've been afraid, she admitted. Not just of the gossip, of what it means to matter to someone powerful. What it costs. His eyes met hers. And now? She exhaled. Now I'm more afraid of letting fear make me small. Silence stretched. Then, quietly, he pulled something from his coat pocket. A folded page. He handed it to her. She opened it. Her resume. With Ethan's handwritten notes in the margins. Smart, observant, excellent instincts. Watch this one. It was dated from the day she'd been hired. Sophie's eyes filled. You noticed me, she whispered. I noticed your work, he said. Before I ever knew your name, before elevators and grilled cheese, you were already remarkable. She bit her lip, emotion catching in her throat. Then, a light, fluttering laugh escaped her. Does this mean you're officially Team Lentil Soup? He chuckled. Let's not push it. Back downstairs, Vanessa stood alone in the HR suite, arms crossed, lips pressed thin. She stared at the lavender handkerchief still resting on the file. She picked it up, studied it, then tossed it, unceremoniously, into the shred bin. She turned toward the hallway. Clara Lynn was standing there. Silent, watching. Vanessa froze. Clara's voice was quiet but sharp. That belonged to her grandmother. You're crossing lines, Vanessa. Vanessa stepped closer, cool smile returning. You don't get to lecture me. You've stood by and said nothing for years. Clara didn't flinch. This time she didn't walk away. Maybe I won't be silent anymore. Around 4:59 p.m., the office buzzed with the usual end-of-day shuffle. Sophie reached her desk and found a small envelope tucked into her monitor stand. No name. Inside, a folded printout from her HR file, scrawled in red pen at the bottom, "You're being watched. Be careful who you trust." Just below it, a copy of her signed NDA with a section mysteriously missing. The envelope was plain. No name, no logo, just folded neatly like it belonged in a movie scene right before everything falls apart. Sophie found it when she returned from the HR lounge, still reeling from the performance review that hadn't felt like a review at all. Someone had slipped it onto her desk while she was gone, silent, invisible. Her fingers hovered before picking it up. She unfolded the flap slowly, heart thudding in her chest like it already knew what was coming. Inside, a single page. A printed copy of her NDA, the one she'd signed during onboarding. Months ago, except something was missing. The final clause, the one marked Section 7.3, Fraternization with Senior Executives. Gone. Blacked out with what looked like a Sharpie, thick, dark, and rushed. Whoever had done this wanted her to notice, to know. Someone was either trying to warn her or protect her. Sophie stared at the paper. She didn't know which possibility scared her more. 20 minutes later, she found herself walking. No destination, just movement. Out of the fluorescent glare of her floor, past the silent judgment of polished heels and whispered side eyes, through the marble lobby, and toward the one place in the building that didn't care who you were. The tiny coffee shop near the freight elevators. She ordered a plain coffee, no syrup, no oat milk, just coffee, and slid into a booth by the window, the same booth interns always claimed when they needed to cry over deadlines or broken printers. She didn't cry, but her hands shook a little. Do you always sit in corners like this? The voice was familiar, low, measured, worn around the edges like it had carried too many late nights. She looked up. Ethan. His coat was unbuttoned, his tie gone, his hair slightly mussed from the wind outside. For once he didn't look like a billionaire CEO. He just looked tired, human. Only on days when HR makes me question my entire existence, Sophie said, forcing a smile. Good reason. He nodded toward the seat across from her. May I? She gestured. He sat. No small talk, no preamble, just silence between them. The kind that only exists when two people know something's broken, and neither knows how to fix it. She slid the folded page toward him. He unfolded it, read quickly, too quickly. His eyes flicked to the missing section, then back to her. Where'd this come from? He asked. It was waiting on my desk when I got back. You know who sent it? She shook her head. I have guesses, she admitted, but nothing solid. He exhaled through his nose. Folded the page again, carefully this time. You weren't supposed to see this. I figured. You weren't supposed to need to see it, he added. Sophie looked down at her coffee, then back at him. Do you think someone's trying to set me up? Ethan met her eyes. No, I think someone's trying to keep you safe. She blinked. From what? He hesitated. Then, from me. The words hung between them. Sharp, honest, Sophie's breath caught in her chest. You think you're the danger? Ethan leaned back in the booth. To your career? To your peace? Yes. She stared at him, stunned. I never wanted this to become your story, he said softly. You didn't ask for attention. You didn't try to impress me. That's what made you different. She stayed quiet. I should have shut it down the moment the whispers started. But I waited. Because if I shut it down, I had to admit something to myself. What? That it meant something. He didn't look at her when he said it. He was watching the traffic through the rain-speckled glass, but his voice cracked, just slightly. Sophie's heart twisted. I didn't plan to like you, he said. Her eyes filled, not with tears, but with something warmer, sadder. I didn't plan to survive this place, she whispered, but here we are. The waiter passed and refilled their cups. Neither of them moved, and then his gaze dropped to the edge of her blazer pocket, where a hint of lavender peeked out. That handkerchief, he said quietly. It's the most honest thing in this entire building. Sophie smiled faintly, brushing her fingers over the fabric. It was stitched for moments that matter, she murmured. Then keep it close, he replied. Sophie couldn't speak. Instead, she reached forward, slowly, took the handkerchief back, but she didn't put it away. She laid it flat on the table between them, like a flag of truce. From the booth behind them came a loud, exasperated voice. Clara, you can't just black out NDA clauses and expect no one to notice. Sophie's eyes widened. She turned slightly, and, sure enough, Clara Lynn, head of investor relations, sat casually at a corner table stirring her tea with a very guilty-looking junior analyst beside her. "I didn't delete it," Clara said calmly. "I redacted it. Totally different crime." The analyst groaned. "You're going to get us both fired." Clara sipped her tea. "Please, this building runs on secrets and grilled cheese now," Sophie blinked. Ethan turned back to her. "You're kidding." "I'm not." "She blacked out your NDA?" "And sent it anonymously, apparently." He laughed under his breath, rubbing his forehead. "I need to give her a raise." Later that evening, when Sophie returned to her desk, a new note was waiting. Official, formal. On Ethan's letterhead, she opened it. To Sophie Hart from Office of the CEO, subject, temporary role transfer. To reduce ongoing scrutiny and provide space for professional growth without distraction, you are invited to temporarily transfer to the Investor Relations and Strategy Department under Clara Lynn's leadership. This is voluntary. If you decline, you'll retain your current role. Whatever you choose, know this: you have not failed. You are not the problem. You are seen. EC, Sophie stared at the letter. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. A way out. But it still felt like surrender. Her eyes drifted down to the handkerchief on her desk. Still soft, still hers, still strong. She picked it up, folded it slowly. She had a choice now: step away from the fire or walk into it with her head high. The office was still. Friday morning, gray clouds pressed against the windows like they were waiting to hear what she'd decide. Sophie Hart stood at her locker, hands resting on the letter from Ethan. She read it again. The offer of transfer, of safety, of stepping sideways before the fire got hotter. It was polite, respectful, generous, and completely wrong for her. She looked down at her grandmother's handkerchief in her hand, the lavender stitching worn from weeks of quiet handling. Sophie didn't want a protected life anymore. She wanted a true one. It was 10:04 a.m. when Janice blinked in surprise as Sophie walked in. "I'd like to submit a formal response," Sophie said calmly, handing over a crisp typed page. Janice adjusted her glasses. "To the creative division transfer?" "No," Sophie replied. "To the review process and the culture around it." Janice glanced up. "You're declining the transfer?" "I'm staying in my current role," Sophie said clearly, "because I earned it, and I won't step back because others can't manage their assumptions." Janice looked uncomfortable. Vanessa, standing near the bookshelf, narrowed her eyes. Sophie continued, her voice steady. "I'm not the story they're trying to tell, and I'm not playing a role in one they wrote without me." She placed the folded handkerchief gently on the corner of Janice's desk. "That belongs in my file," she said, still. Then she turned and walked out. It was 12:30 p.m., and Sophie was making copies. Yes, really. The printer was jammed, again, and Maddie had disappeared for her Friday emergency yoga session. So Sophie rolled up her sleeves and pulled out the toner tray like she had a degree in office machinery survival. Ethan walked in, carrying 2 coffees. He froze when he saw her crouched on the floor, toner on her hands, trying not to curse at the machine. "You fix copiers now?" She stood up, brushing her palms. "Only when sabotage seems less stressful than hiding." He handed her a coffee. No words, just warmth in a paper cup. Their eyes met. "I saw the file response," he said. "I meant every word." "You're brave." "I'm tired." He gave a quiet nod. "You'll have more people watching you now." "I know." He hesitated. Then, "I'm one of them." Suddenly, the door burst open. Clara Lynn entered like she'd been waiting for her cue in a soap opera. "Sorry, has anyone seen my cardigan? It's cashmere, ethically sourced, and I left it somewhere between my desk and an existential crisis." Sophie blinked. Ethan stared. Clara looked at them both. "Am I interrupting a toner romance?" Sophie laughed. Ethan rubbed his temple. Clara spotted the handkerchief peeking from Sophie's blazer pocket. Her tone softened. "Still got it, huh?" Sophie nodded. I had one like that, Clara said gently, except mine was a bright red scarf. I wore it the day I told the board I was not going to be their diversity mascot. I got a lot of flack, but they never forgot me after that. Then she smiled. They'll never forget you. Either. Later that afternoon, the company was hosting its quarterly town hall, a streaming event for staff across all branches. Ethan was expected to deliver the closing remarks. Sophie watched from the side of the executive conference room, arms folded, trying to stay invisible. She shouldn't have worried. When Ethan walked on stage, his entire demeanor was different. Gone was the script he usually read from. He looked up, straight at the camera, then directly at her, and he said, "Culture isn't measured by what we post. It's revealed in how we treat the people no one's watching." A hush. Even Vanessa looked up from her tablet. Lately, I've seen someone, a remarkable woman, be reduced to gossip, mocked, judged, not for what she's done, but for how I looked at her in an elevator. The room stopped breathing. Let me make this clear. I looked at her because she mattered, because she reminded me that being real in this building is still possible. If being open about that hurts my image, then maybe my image is the problem. Dead. Silence, then applause. Soft at first, then louder. Even some executives stood. Sophie couldn't move. Clara leaned over and whispered, "Well, guess that NDA clause is definitely shredded now." Sophie slipped out before the stream ended. Too much, too fast. She needed air. But in the hallway outside the boardroom, Vanessa was waiting, still, elegant, icy. "I hope you're enjoying the spotlight," Vanessa said smoothly. "I didn't ask for it," Sophie replied. "No," Vanessa agreed, "but now you have it, and all that comes with it." She stepped closer. "You don't get to have this job, his affection, and the moral high ground. Pick one, Sophie, while you still can." Sophie met her gaze without flinching. "I already did," then turned, walked away, back straight, shoulders lifted, handkerchief tucked in her palm like armor. Sophie stood on the rooftop terrace again. Same wind, same view, but everything felt different now. Below, the city blinked in its usual blur of movement. Emails, schedules, rumors, lives colliding between coffee breaks. But up here, above it all, she could hear her own breathing again. And then she heard his, Ethan. She didn't need to turn to know it was him. She recognized the rhythm of his footsteps now, calm, patient, like he never needed to rush with her. He stopped a few feet away. Neither of them spoke. For a while the silence said enough. Then, softly, "I meant every word I said in the town hall." Sophie turned slowly. His eyes were on hers. Clear, steady, honest. "I know," she said, "but that was public." "This is different," he nodded. "You don't owe me anything, Ethan." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I want to give it anyway." He stepped closer, hands in his coat pockets. "There's 100 reasons why this shouldn't happen," he said, "but I can't pretend anymore." Her breath caught. "I don't look at you like that because you're new, or because I'm lonely, or because it's some office cliché." "Then why?" He took a slow breath. "Because you remind me who I was before the title, before the walls, before I learned how to wear a suit like armor." Her eyes stung. "I don't want to be someone's reminder," she whispered. "I don't want you to be just that," he said gently. "But if I'm honest, you woke something up in me I thought I'd buried." He looked at her like he wasn't sure how much to say. Then, just above a whisper, "I think I'm falling in love with you, Sophie." She didn't move, didn't breathe, until the door behind them burst open. "Mr. Cole?" A junior staffer. Junior, red-faced, panicked. "You're needed in Conference 4. It's urgent. Something with the internal audit team. There's something bad." Ethan cursed softly under his breath. He turned to Sophie. "Don't move. I'll be back." She nodded, still stunned. He ran, and just like that, the confession hung in the air. Unfinished. 15 minutes later, Sophie waited in the break room, hoping her hands would stop shaking. Clara appeared like clockwork, holding a sandwich in one hand and a sarcastic smirk in the other. Was that a rooftop confession? Sophie blinked. He said, he thinks he's falling in love with me. Clara took a giant bite of her sandwich. Girl? I didn't say anything back. Even better. What? Clara wiped her mouth. If it's real, it won't need rushing. It'll wait for you to believe it. It was 1:03 p.m. on a Friday when staff were free to post notes, anonymous suggestions, and birthday cards on the big corkboard near the main elevators. Most people never paid attention. But that Friday, Sophie did. She walked up, pinched the lavender handkerchief between her fingers, and pinned it to the board with a small note underneath. When they write your story for you, tell it louder. She didn't sign it, but everyone knew who it was from. And this time, they didn't mock her. They took photos, they whispered, but the tone had changed. The mood in the building had shifted. Sophie Hart wasn't an accident. She was a presence. It was 3:11 p.m. when the internal audit team called a private meeting. It wasn't about money, it was about access. Specifically, who had accessed Sophie's HR file. The security logs were clear. Nina. She'd copied the elevator photo. She'd submitted the first anonymous concern. She'd accessed the HRIS system, exported Sophie's NDA as a PDF, manually redacted Section 7.3, and then leaked the altered file. Why? Because she had wanted the investor relations and strategy role that Clara ended up offering to Sophie, and because she'd once dated Ethan. Briefly, quietly, years ago. Sophie stood in the hallway outside the glass conference room, watching Nina fidget as Clara and the compliance team confronted her. No yelling, no drama, just truth. And the slow crumbling of a mask Nina had worn far too long. It was 4:01 p.m. when the elevator doors opened. Sophie stepped in. So did Ethan, just the two of them, again, like a circle closing. He didn't speak at first, just looked down at the floor, then at her. His voice was quiet. I never wanted you to be dragged through all this. She smiled softly. You didn't drag me. I walked. He looked at her then, really looked, and said, Next week, I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations for a while. She blinked. You're leaving? Not forever, he said. But I can't be a good CEO and pretend I'm not in love with someone who works 3 floors down. Her heart raced. He added, I'm stepping down so I can step toward you. Before she could answer, the doors opened. A crowd waited outside. Several heads turned. And then? He reached forward, carefully, without fanfare, and tucked the edge of the lavender handkerchief into his breast pocket. Public, quiet, undeniable. A gesture that said, She matters. This matters. I'm not hiding it anymore. Gasps, whispers, shutter clicks of office phones. And Sophie, she stood beside him, still, steady, not afraid anymore. Not. The building felt different now. Not quieter, just clearer. People didn't whisper anymore when Sophie walked by. They nodded, smiled. Some even straightened their posture, like proximity to her might give them a little more courage. She didn't ask for it. She didn't want to be a symbol. But something had changed the moment Ethan tucked that lavender handkerchief into his pocket, like a line had been drawn. Not just between right and wrong, but between shame and respect. Now every choice Sophie made felt rooted in something real, not in fear, but in who she'd become. On Monday morning, she arrived early, not to prove anything, but because it felt right. She made tea instead of coffee, wore her softest white blouse and flat shoes that didn't click when she walked. No armor today, just presence. At her desk, a small paper bag was waiting. Inside, a warm biscuit, still fresh. Tucked underneath, a handwritten note. For the girl who stayed, you see. Clara, Sophie smiled. She sat in her chair, tore a piece of biscuit, and let the silence wrap around her like morning sunlight. It wasn't a victory meal, it was a grounding one. It was 10:22 a.m. when Ethan stepped into her workspace quietly, wearing jeans for the first time in ever. She looked up. "Casual Monday?" "I'm technically not your boss anymore," he said. Her brows lifted. "Right." He hesitated, then nodded toward the hallway. "Walk with me?" She stood. They walked without speaking, through the long glass corridor above the lobby, where sunlight pooled in pockets along the floor. It smelled like fresh polish and change. "I'm heading to the lake house for a while," he said. Sophie blinked. "You have a lake house? Don't sound so surprised." "Sorry. I just pictured you in cities, hotels, glass walls." He smiled. "Sometimes I need trees." She gave a soft laugh. "Don't we all?" He stopped walking. They stood beside a tall pane of glass. The city moved below them like a film reel, fast, forgettable, but this moment felt like it might last forever. "You don't owe me an answer," he said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. I just needed you to know that I meant it. What I said. What I feel." She turned toward him. "I know." He looked at her, searching, not asking, just waiting. And in that stillness, Sophie realized she could say something now. She could reach for his hand or his shirt or his heart. But instead, she reached into her blazer and gently pulled the handkerchief from her pocket. It was pressed, folded, worn with memory, still soft with years of care. She held it out to him. He looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "I'm not," she admitted. "But I think you should have it." He took it slowly, almost reverently. "It doesn't mean what you think," she said. "What does it mean?" She smiled softly. "It means I'm not running anymore." It was 1:04 p.m. when a surprise announcement hit the company intranet. Sophie Hart, new Assistant Strategy Coordinator, reporting directly to Clara Lynn. Effective immediately, and below it a small italicized note. "No one rises alone." Sophie's inbox overflowed, not with gossip, but with congratulations. Even Nina sent a one-line message. "You earned it, I didn't." And Clara, of course, replied with, "We rise when the quiet ones start speaking louder than the noise." Biscuits tomorrow? It was 7:42 p.m. after hours. Sophie stayed late, not to impress anyone, just to enjoy the silence of her new desk. As she packed up, she noticed something tucked inside her top drawer. Not a note, not a biscuit, a small box with a silver key inside. Taped beneath it, a note, "Lake House is 3 hours away if you ever need trees or quiet or someone who sees you completely. E." No demands, no deadline, just a key and a choice. Sophie stood there a long time, the key in her palm, the city lights blinking behind her like impatient stars. She didn't cry, she didn't laugh. She just breathed, long, deep, free. Then, slowly, she folded the handkerchief one more time and placed it inside the box, not to give it up, but to carry it forward, because the girl who had once wanted to disappear in an elevator was gone, and the woman who remained was finally home in herself. The lake didn't speak loudly, it simply existed. Soft ripples moved across the surface, stirred gently by the wind, like the lake itself was breathing, slow and steady. A place for people who had once been rushed, lost, or unsure, a place for people like her. Sophie stood at the edge of the dock, shoes off, toes just brushing the wood. The air smelled like pine, rain, and morning. Behind her, the lake house sat quietly among the trees, white siding, ivy on the porch, a crooked mailbox with fading initials, EC. She hadn't told anyone she was coming, not even him. She just used the key. Earlier that day, she'd woken up before the alarm, sat in her apartment staring at the box he'd left her. Inside, the key, and next to it, her handkerchief, still folded, still hers. Only now something was tucked inside it. A letter, handwritten, just 3 lines. "I'll be there if you ever want to come. If you don't, I'll still understand, but I hope you do." No signature. He didn't need one. Back at the lake, she made tea, his favorite, Earl Grey, left it on the porch, let the steam drift up into the cold air. She didn't expect him to appear. But then, there he was, no suit, no shine. Just a man in a navy sweater, jeans and soft eyes. "You came," he said, voice quiet. Sophie nodded. "You left a key." "You kept the handkerchief." "I almost didn't." "Why not?" "Because it started as comfort," she said. "Then it became a shield. And now—" She looked at him. "It's a memory, but I'm not living in that memory anymore." He nodded. Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out his own, not hers, a new one, cream fabric, neatly stitched, but not with lavender flowers. This one had a small pine tree. "For the next chapter," he said. She laughed gently, a laugh that came from somewhere deep. He handed it to her. No pressure, no expectation, just a gift, and she took it. Later that afternoon, they sat beneath an old oak tree at the back of the property, its roots thick and mossy. A blanket was spread out, nothing fancy, just a shared sandwich, fresh bread, tomatoes, a jar of honey. Sophie broke the bread and handed him half. "Did you grow this food yourself?" she teased. "No, but I bought it with an apron on, if that counts." She grinned. "I wish I had seen that." "You still can." They ate in silence, the way people do when silence feels full, not empty. No need to prove anything. No need to explain, just here, just now. After the last bite, Ethan looked at her, eyes soft, no walls. "I don't want a perfect love story, Sophie. I want one we build slowly, quietly, with our hands, our mistakes, and our mornings." She nodded, heart full. "And no elevators," she added. He laughed. "Skrr." "Agreed." A breeze lifted her hair. She leaned into him, rested her head on his shoulder, and there, under that oak tree by the water, with no audience, no titles, and no performance, they were just 2 people, starting again. Before they left the lake, Sophie stood once more at the edge of the dock. She took the original handkerchief, the one with the lavender flowers, and unfolded it gently. She didn't toss it into the lake. She didn't bury it in the soil. She tucked it in a small glass box and placed it on the cabin's windowsill, where the light could touch it, where it could stay safe, and where someday someone else might see it and know a story had started there. 1 year later, the lake hadn't changed. The trees still whispered the same way. The porch creaked like an old song, but Sophie, she had changed. She pulled up quietly, no rush, no noise, barefoot, like always, heart steady, heart. The key turned easily in the old lock, like it had been waiting for her all along. Ethan was already on the porch, wiping flour off his sweater. There was a smudge on his cheek. He looked at her like she was exactly where she belonged. "I thought you might not come," he said, smiling. "You left me a key," she replied, stepping up. "And biscuits." He held up a plate, still warm, no promises about taste. She took one, sat on the step, looked at him. "I know what you're going to ask," she said. He grinned. "Oh? What am I going to ask?" "You're going to ask me if I'd marry you." He paused, then nodded. "Well, yes." Sophie didn't look away. Her voice was calm, grounded. "Yes, but not out of fear or timing or to quiet anyone else's story. Yes, because I've already made a life with you, and I want to keep making one. Not someday, not maybe. Just yes." Ethan blinked, then exhaled, the kind of breath you only let go of when everything finally lands in its place. "Then I think," he said gently, "we finally get to start the next page." On the table beside them, under a glass cover, sat the handkerchief, the lavender-stitched one, her grandmother's, still soft, still strong. Beside it was a new one, cream fabric, stitched not with lavender, but a pine tree and a small date embroidered in golden thread. Today's date, Sophie smiled. No flowers? Ethan leaned closer. I figured we've bloomed enough. She laughed, the kind of laugh that holds love, memory, and the quiet joy of finally choosing your life exactly as it is. They didn't rush, they didn't pose, they just sat together, certain. She didn't wait because she was afraid. She waited because this time love didn't have to mean losing herself. And when she finally said yes, it wasn't about giving anything up. It was about choosing a place where she could be fully herself, a place that felt, at last, like home. Now, to you watching, would you have said yes right away? Or would you have waited for the moment that felt truly yours? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Like if this story touched your heart, subscribe if you want more stories about love, courage, and dignity. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, stay soft, stay strong, and always choose love on your own terms. The end.